Hey BookTube, it's Samantha and I am back, at least for the moment. I've actually been in the mood to read for about 2 to 3 weeks and I actually read some books in June. Now, this isn't going to be necessarily a pure June wrap up, as I am going to be including books that I've read for this first week of July as well. My library has thankfully reopened, but that also means that that big pile of library books that I had like months ago, they're now due. So I'm going to talk about the books that I have read from the library that I am going to have to turn back in, and we'll just kind of see what happens when our July wrap up happens. So the one that has been meant to be finished for years, and I have finally finished it, and that is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. This is the final and the 7th book. I finally record a video. Okay, you can get it. I just feel goofy when I'm talking to a camera and then I feel silly. You make me feel silly.
Sounds like a you problem.
This is the 7th and final installment of the Dark Tower series, which is kind of Stephen King's magnum opus piece. It took him, oh gosh, he always writes when he finishes, like starts and finishes his books at the very end. He started writing the series in 1970 and finished it in 2004. So it took him almost 35 years to write this entire series, which is really interesting to see how his writing changes over time. I obviously cannot talk too much about this book because major spoilers, and I think part of why I had put off this book was because I had actually been spoiled partially what happens at the very end years ago, and I thought that I would get over it, like I would forget, because some books I do forget. I'll be spoiled by them and I completely forget what it was, but this one, it just never happened. I think because I knew, like, I was wanting to forget it, so it kept on coming back in my mind. You need to forget about that one spoiler. Don't spoil people, okay? Just don't do it. This book, I enjoyed it. There were some things that I obviously did not care for. And a big part of it is that that's the way that the story needed to wrap up, and I just was having a very difficult time coming to terms with that. I really enjoyed the ending of this book, though. It's a little controversial in how it ends. I don't think everyone is necessarily happy with how this ended, but I actually really liked it. I feel like it fit the tone of the series overall, and maybe it was some kind of last-ditch effort by Stephen King. He did write in his author's note that it wasn't necessarily the ending that he wanted, but it was what fit, and I agree with that. It did fit with what was going on. You develop such a huge attachment for these characters. Like Roland, who's the main character, the gunslinger, has just been a huge part of my reading life, and I just feel this huge connection with him. I think that's one of the biggest things that I love about this series, is that I so deeply knew each one of these characters. It's as if I could have walked out the door and gone out to coffee with one of them. I knew all of them. And so they were so alive to me, kind of like Never-Ending Story, you know, where these characters are just so real and so honest. I loved that. There were some parts where it seemed a little bit slow. Like I think Stephen King could have knocked out like maybe 100, 200 pages out of this book to make it a little bit more doable. There was some content in there I don't think was necessarily needed, or he could at least trim down. I think it's really easy to get through like the first half, and then that one scene happens. the part where I always DNF. And then you kind of fight through that. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, cool. And then it hits a lull. And I was getting through the lull okay because I was reading. This is when I was just starting to try and get back into reading again. So I would read for a half hour at a time, 15 minutes at a time. So it was intriguing enough that it was light enough for me to read when I wasn't really wanting to read and keep going through, but it definitely wasn't action-packed or anything during that lull. So that was a little rough. Just kind of know that in mind. There are a lot of people, I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there are a lot of people that are wondering, like, can you just read a book as a standalone, or do you have to read the whole series, or should I read the whole series? And I think it's different for each person. For me, one of my favorite books is the very first one, The Gunslinger. And I always tell people that you could read it as a standalone. It does have a form of an ending. It's not a complete ending. Like, I mean, I don't even know if you could call this a complete ending. But it has its own form of ending so that you only really need to read the first one. A lot of people really like the second one, and I also enjoy the second one. It has a lot more character development. The third one, not my favorite. Fourth one, I love. Not everyone loves it, but most people who love the world and want to know more about Roland and his backstory, that's the entirety of book 4, is learning more about him. So if you want to learn more, book 4 is great. And then from there on, it's focused on the weird overall arching plot that Stephen King's writing, and it gets really weird. And I think for some people, it's a little too weird. And I get it, you know, that it's not everyone's cup of tea. So, do I think it was worth reading this? For me, yes. Am I going to reread it multiple times over and over and over again? Probably not. I think I gave this book 4 stars, and that's I think that's where I would sit at. 3.5, 4 stars. And with my ratings, that means I enjoyed the ride while I was reading it, but my likelihood of picking it up again probably isn't as high. This book is really heavy. But would I reread the first 3 or 4 books of the series? Definitely, and I actually have. So, kind of up to you. If you read the first one and you're like, this is way too weird for me, it's not your cup of tea. That's fine. If you get through the first one, you're like, okay, I liked it, I'm not sure where it's going, read the second one. And if you're still not crazy about it, then don't worry about it. But if you're loving the second one, I think you would enjoy the rest. I'm just curious. Let me know your thoughts if you've actually read the series yourself. It seems to be one of those controversial points that not everyone loves it. You can be a Stephen King fan and not love his series. The next book I read, because believe it or not, this is the first book I finished in my book slump. But that was because I was like already 600, 700 pages through when things got rough. So it wasn't as overwhelming because I was already over halfway done with the book. But the next one, I knew I wanted something light, something I knew I was going to breeze through. So that was Hexed by Kevin Hearn, which is book 2 of the Iron Druid Chronicles. My bad. This hit the spot. I think I blew through this again within a couple of days, which made me feel better about reading. I found that enjoyment of reading again. It is about a druid named Sullivan, well, first name Atticus, but he is living in this town in Arizona, and there are a lot of other supernatural beings like vampires, werewolves, witches that are in town, and just trying to find the right balance between all of that, and things are going down. I find Atticus funny. He has this wolfhound named Oberon, that is absolutely adorable. I love him. And I just really like the interplay of Atticus with all the different characters. I like everyone that's in there, and some of them it's like, yeah, love to hate him kind of thing. It's just light, fun, not serious reading whatsoever. I've been thoroughly enjoying this, and I'm definitely going to be picking up the third book, Hammered, really soon, because when it's hard to read, you go for stuff that's easy to read. So those are the actual 2 books that I read in June. Now, the books that I have actually finished within the past week, which kind of surprises me, to be honest. Next one is A Murder is Announced by Agatha Christie. This is a book that I was just randomly looking at the shelves at the library, and the title intrigued me because obviously there's like no cover to it. And it's Agatha Christie. I've been trying to read more books of the classic mystery genre and have been finding a lot of them dated. But I wanted to give this a try, and this is a Miss Marple mystery. I did Hercule Poirot. I know I'm not saying that right, but I did him with Murder on the Orient Express, and I enjoyed the mystery, but some of the stereotypes were dated. So was giving this a try. This is about a really, really small village where it is announced in the newspaper that there will be a murder at a certain location at a certain time. And all the neighbors are really nosy, so they all go to the person's house thinking different things. Some of them thinking that it's like a murder mystery party. Others are thinking it's just a little hoax. And they go, and then a murder is actually committed. And it kind of goes from there. I would say for the first third of this book, it was a lot of character setup and getting the scene set up for the murder. And that part was probably the hardest part to get through because all the character development was extremely dated. I had mentioned in the group, the Space Sirens, which I'll leave their Twitter link down below because we're doing a book club. But I was talking with them and saying how it's kind of hard to read when the word keeps getting mentioned over and over and over and over and over and over again in relation to old women. I'm not even joking. Old women. And it's, I don't get it. It's obviously dated. Obviously it was a normal phrase to use for old women. It was just dated. And so there was a lot of that stuff going on in the beginning. But once the murder happened, from there on, it was a really nice, easy, speedy read. You saw the people talking to each of the characters, getting their story, and all the interplay that happens before that or after that is really intriguing. Now, I thought Miss Marple was going to be like the main investigator, but she really wasn't. It was the investigator of the town, Craddock, Craddock. Craddock was the main one, and then Miss Marple was kind of like just helping on the side a little bit, and so that was different. I enjoyed the mystery overall. It was a light read, but just be forewarned, it's dated. I mean, I think it was written or published so it was originally published in 1950, okay? And this publication right here, I think is 1985. As long as you know what you're reading when you go into it, be prepared. It's not going to be PC. And then the next 3 books I've actually read over the past couple of days because 1, I knew it'd be quick to read them, and 2, again, books due at the library. And that is volumes 4 through 6 of the Wonder Woman series, the New 52 version. I read volume 4, War, and part of volume 5, Flesh, yesterday. And then I finished Flesh and completed Bones today. In a previous video, I had talked about how I was wondering if the story was going to be complete after volume 6. And it seemed to be a lot of questions about like its comic book series arcs don't really wrap up, and which is fine. But after reading volume 6, I think it is the final one because it seemed like an end of an arc. The overall story seemed to come to a completion, and there might be, like I mentioned, there was like through volumes 9 or something, but I don't think they're necessarily in addition to this story. And maybe they start a brand new arc in volume 7. I'm not sure. But just because my library doesn't have volume 7 and on, as far as I know, this is probably where I'm going to stop with it. It's just hard because I like Wonder Woman, but I don't necessarily know if these volumes, especially these last 3, are a really good representation of Wonder Woman. It was more focused on the people around Wonder Woman rather than Wonder Woman herself, even though she seemed to be the core person who tied everyone together. It was okay. It was okay. It definitely was building up and building up and building up, but even once I got to the last volume, everything seemed to end like all at once. Characters that didn't necessarily get along for most of the other volumes are now all of a sudden getting along. So it's just, it was okay. It was okay, but the artwork is absolutely beautiful in these books. I could follow the action that was going on, and I feel like the artwork really did a good job of demonstrating the character and personalities of the different people. It was just the storyline wasn't that great. So yeah, these are all the books that I've read so far, which I'm actually very proud of. Considering the last time I read was, I think, in March. It's been a while, but I am definitely feeling better about reading, and be on the lookout. I'm going to be creating a video of the books that I am actually really intrigued to pick up next, and I've actually bought a couple of books that I'm really excited about reading about. So keep an eye out for that, and I may not be seeing you as frequently as I have been, but I will be seeing you around. So until next time, see ya.